Mr. President, is there anything China, Canada, and Mexico can do tonight to forestall your implementation of tariffs tomorrow?
No, nothing. It's, as you know, we have about a $200 billion deficit with Canada, getting close to $200 billion. They've treated us very unfairly. And I say, why should we be subsidizing Canada? It's wonderful. I have so many friends in Canada. It's a great place.
Is there a concession you're looking for, sir?
No, we're not looking for a concession, and we'll just see what happens.
Tonight, the Trump trade wars of friendship ruined? From Montreal, this is episode 19 of Night Talk. I'm Gary MacDonald.
And I'm Edith Kallick, still in Tulum, Mexico.
And I bet it's a lot warmer there today than what it has been in Montreal today.
Yeah, it certainly is. We are about 30 degrees centigrade, so you're looking at about 85 Fahrenheit for American friends. Living the life and enjoying retirement. And as we spoke offline earlier on, Manel and I, my wife, were just so fortunate that her son, my stepson, has a successful villa management and experience company here in Tulum. So, had it not been for that and being able to stay with him, I'd be shacked up right next to you in the freezing cold, Gary.
Well, I have some scotch to keep me warm, so that'll keep the ice off the pipes, so to speak. Well,
for sure.
A lot of things were warm in the past week or so. Last week, U.S. President Donald Trump announced he would impose a 25% tariff on Canadian goods with the exception of oil and gas, which would only see a 10% tariff imposed effective February 4th, last Tuesday. Mexico would also be subjected to a 25% tariff on its goods sold to the U.S. The reason or reasons? Well, Trump has complained about the flow of drugs, especially fentanyl, and illegals through our borders. He has also complained about the trade imbalance, that we are selling more to the U.S. than we are buying. That prompted a speech by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau late Saturday night.
As President John F. Kennedy said many years ago, geography has made us neighbors, history has made us friends, economics has made us partners, and necessity has made us allies. That rang true for many decades prior to President Kennedy's time in office, and in the decades since. From the beaches of Normandy to the mountains of the Korean Peninsula, from the fields of Flanders to the streets of Kandahar, we have fought and died alongside you. During your darkest hours, during the Iranian hostage crisis, those 444 days we worked around the clock from our embassy to get your innocent compatriots home. During the summer of 2005, when Hurricane Katrina ravaged your great city of New Orleans, or mere weeks ago, when we sent water bombers to tackle the wildfires in California. During the day the world stood still, September 11th, 2001, when we provided refuge to stranded passengers and planes, we were always there, standing with you, grieving with you, the American people. Together, we've built the most successful economic, military, and security partnership the world has ever seen. A relationship that has been the envy of the world. Yes, we've had our differences in the past, but we've always found a way to get past them. As I've said before, if President Trump wants to usher in a new golden age for the United States, the better path is to partner with Canada, not to punish us.
And with that, he took off the gloves and...
Unfortunately, the actions taken today by the White House split us apart instead of bringing us together. Tonight, I am announcing Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods. This will include immediate tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods as of Tuesday, followed by further tariffs on $125 billion worth of American products in 21 days' time to allow Canadian companies and supply chains to seek to find alternatives. Like the American tariffs, our response will also be far-reaching and include everyday items such as American beer, wine, and bourbon, fruits and fruit juices, including orange juice, along with vegetables, perfume, clothing, and shoes. It'll include major consumer products like household appliances, furniture, and sports equipment, and materials like lumber and plastics, along with much, much more. And as part of our response, we are considering, with the provinces and territories, several non-tariff measures, including some relating to critical minerals, energy, procurement, and other partnerships.
And Eddie, first of all, before we even mention the other guy, I have to say one thing. I watched the speech live last Saturday night, and I don't know who his speechwriter was, but whoever it was did just, I felt, a phenomenal job in putting that speech together and hitting all of the right points. And I have to give Justin Trudeau full marks for his delivery as well, especially when he got to the part where he said, I want to speak to the American people, looked the camera right on, and then started going down through what Canadians have done to be by their American friends, by their sides through thick and thin. And, those are the major things. Yeah. And those are the major things. There are a lot of other things. I was sitting there that night and all of a sudden, other things came to mind. And I'm thinking, wow, we're always there. So full marks to the speechwriter and to Trudeau for both the composition of the speech and Trudeau's delivery. I thought it was just a phenomenal job. One of the best I've witnessed him deliver overall.
In a while,
yeah.
Absolutely. And you know what? It was very difficult not to feel more patriotic and prouder to be a Canadian than after listening to that speech. I know there was a lot of people rallying around, what it is to be Canadian, how important it is to be Canadian and always be Canadian without the rhetoric back and forth. That's just our culture and our character. And we were already feeling proud before Trudeau's speech. And with Trudeau's speech, I think it just put people in the mood to actually put on a Canadian flag, regardless of race, color, creed, what province you're from, who you vote for, and just everybody seems to have joined the bandwagon. And there's a lot of stuff on the internet flying around right now, and I think somebody mentioned, boy, you really must have pissed off Quebecers for them to actually put on a Canadian flag in an effort to bring this insanity to correct this insanity if any way possible. Even Quebec is on board. So it's really great to see Canadians gather around a common cause. Invariably, if you look at the list that Mr. Trudeau mentioned, we band together when the times get tough and the going gets tough. And if we're going to follow through on a lot of the stuff we're going to discuss later on, it's just going to strengthen our resolve, right? So I was very happy for him, as a matter of fact. I know I've been quite critical of him. Both you and I have been critical of his tenure, his last mandate. And you know what? That's a nice way to go out with a bang. I thought he did a real nice job with that.
He really did, and the whole scenario of what has taken place over the last few days has, as you said, ignited a new sense of patriotism here in Canada. And in the next segment, we'll get into that in more detail, along with some of the outpouring of support on social media. I've picked up a few clips to pass along, which I just couldn't believe it. The emotions that you could feel in some of these posts, and I'm talking from different, over in Europe, in Mexico in particular, there were some Mexicans who came along and said that they were so proud and of the support because people were saying here in Canada, buy Canadian and buy Mexican. And, some of the people in Mexico were on and they were saying about, we're so proud and so appreciative. And believe me, we're pushing it the same way here. Buy Mexican and buy Canadian kind of thing. But we'll get into that in more detail. I think that there are a couple of things coming out of this whole thing between Canada and the U.S., and particularly Trump. First of all, it was a real slap in the face to Canada and Mexico when he slaps 25% tariffs on us, except for our energy, our oil and gas, which he hit 10%. And he goes to China because he's in a bit of a match with them as well, and hits them with just a 10% tariff on all goods coming into the country. To me, that's a real slap in the face. What the hell has China done for the U.S.? Do they send people down? Did they send power crews down to help when after ice storms and hurricanes and tornadoes to help restore power? Do they send firefighters down and water bombers down? No. They do nothing. And to me, that was a real slight to be hit with just a 10% tariff on all goods for China.
Don't President Trump's companies buy their steel from China, by the way?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah, I believe that's the case in a lot of his projects.
I wouldn't be surprised if he's getting it cheaper.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah, because
what have they done for us here in North America that they deserve just a 10% hit, right, compared to what we were going to get smacked with? It's a shame. It's you're absolutely right. It's an absolute smack in the face to Canadians after all we've been through. And I mean, we're talking about 150, 175 years of good, sound business practices across the border, just basically, in my opinion, completely destroyed over a couple of weeks of this going on a serious scale. So yeah, it's an absolute shame that China got off easy on this. I mean, yeah, we got a 30-day reprieve on this, but I think the damage has already been done, and I know we're going to get into this later on.
Right. And before we go any farther, just wanted to remind you, if you're watching now and you have some comments, some thoughts about what's taken place over the last week or so, by all means, put your comments into either the live chat on YouTube or into the comment section on Facebook, and it will come into us, and we want to get you involved in the conversation. We want to know what you think about what's happened over the last week or two. So by all means, post your comments. We will feature them, try and feature as many of them as possible. Now, already we have one just popped in. So let's go here and bring up the comment. There we go. Bruce Douglas, remember, he wants to be a dick like Putin and the leader of China. So Adolf Trump will give them breaks to be their friend. He does have a real desire to be a dictator. You can see it, and it's becoming more apparent just with some of the moves. There's a lot of, some of these executive orders have been overturned by courts already. He's just kind of riding roughshod over the Constitution. And then you've got the unelected president, Elon Musk, going in and upsetting things and getting access, or trying to get access to thousands upon thousands of files. What is going on here? And why aren't Republicans Well, I know why they're not. Most of them are afraid of him. That's the bottom line. They're cowards. They're afraid of him. They won't stand up to him. And, so it's really frustrating watching it from this side of the border and to see what's going on down there. Really, really frustrating. Bruce, thank you for your comment. We appreciate that.
Nice comment, yeah. Well, isn't that kind of like, I mean, what's going on right now? Yeah, the entire House in the United States, not doing anything about Elon running roughshod or even President Trump running roughshod. And I think everyone is afraid. They're literally more afraid of him this term than they were last term. Okay, and yeah, very much so. He seems to be pushing an agenda that kind of, I won't say even borderline, but it's actually going into the side of establishing a clear-cut oligarchy in the United States of America, because it seems to be right out of Putin's playbook. It almost looks like he's taken bits and pieces out of four known strongmen and dictators around the planet, putting a playbook around that and trying to establish a government around that. On top of that is a selfishness. He only does things as long as it's good for Mr. Trump. So there's a lot at play here, it's unfortunate for the rest of the world. Very unfortunate for at this particular point, I'll say half the population of the United States. That this has just started, and it's going to get worse, and it's been progressively getting worse over the last couple of weeks, Gary. So, yeah, I think that Bruce's comments are pretty much bang on,
Yep, he just added something. Today's order is he will do away with the CIA, so you look ahead. He's getting rid of any department that can investigate anything he does or may do. And don't forget, he also fired a number of FBI agents and other FBI officials who were involved in any of the investigations during the Biden regime, investigations against Trump. And the other thing of it is that we have to, it was originally pushed off as a joke, but it's no joke, because he continues to make these comments, and they're veiled, but the threats are becoming, I think, more open to bring Canada on as the 51st state. And
it's pretty hard for us to ignore that. I mean, his backbenchers and his cabinet are basically saying, "Oh, you know what? That's not what he meant," and Canada's misunderstanding a lot of things, and we'll get into that later on. Canada's missing this and missing that. But by the same token, he's literally said on camera that he will use economic pressure on Canada to get them to become the 51st state of the United States of America. How much clearer can a human being get in terms of his messaging to at least us in Canada that his constituents and his cabinet and his backbenchers don't understand that this is, in fact, something he wants to do, and then to insult our intelligence by saying, "Oh, you got it all wrong." Do I look that stupid, Gary? I don't think so.
Well, here's the other side of it. So Trudeau announced what our counter tariffs would be late Saturday night. And I want to say one thing. Last week and the week before, I wanted to just come out and hit them hard, bang, right out of the gate.
Yeah.
After listening to what they were doing and how they were going to do it, and do, first of all, this tiered response, you know what? It really made sense when you think about it. It really did make sense as to how we were going to do it. Because, they're right. Canadian companies would need some time to find new supply chain sources of supply for goods that would be hit with tariffs, counter tariffs. And so that was a good move. I have to give the government, the federal and provincial leaders, full marks, and they did it in consultation with the business community. I have to give everyone full marks for coming up with that approach. And in the long run, as cooler heads prevailed and I thought about it more, it made a whole lot of sense, and I think they did the right thing the way they did it. Now, the other thing of it is, who blinked first? First of all, Trudeau said Saturday night in response to a reporter's question that he has not been able to reach Trump since Inauguration Day. Hasn't had any conversation with Trump at all. Well, lo and behold, Monday morning, just after the markets open overseas and then coming into pre-trading on the North American markets, and they're down. And all of a sudden, ring, ring. And Trump and Trudeau are talking by phone. And then later on, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there's another phone call. And shortly after that, Trump's announcing that he's going to hold off on the tariffs for at least 30 days. And we'll get into his tweets. But in the meantime, some of the tweets or posts over the weekend on Truth Social from him, like, is he playing with a full card, full deck of cards here? Like, wow, it's starting to get pretty scary in a lot of ways. And I was just looking just before we went to air, an opinion piece that was posted to CTV News. Canada tests Trump's tough guy shtick and comes up a winner. And it's by Eric Ham, and what was he? Excuse me. He's the best-selling author and former congressional staffer in the U.S. Congress. And he said, yeah, well, we gave it to Trump in more ways than one on that day.
Yeah. Well,
so
you know how he works. It's all about the win. We talked a little bit about his style of negotiation last week. It's all about the win. You know what? I think the message we're sending as Canadians, and the same thing as Scheinbaum, I believe in Mexico, that was their last name, the president of Mexico. I think we clearly demonstrated, Mr. Trump, this is not a win-lose game. We're here to play serious. And for some reason, with all the rants on his portfolio, his webpage, and his social media, it almost seems like a cat and mouse game that children play. Canada is serious. Mexico is serious. You know what? The European Union is getting ready. They're serious. So I don't know what's going on with this childish cat and mouse game. This is serious business. And who flinched first? Personally, I really don't care. The message was sent by Canada. The message was sent by Mexico. And I think that Wall Street sent a clear message to Mr. Trump, shot across his bow. You tell me what corporate executive or professed corporate executive, as in terms of Mr. Trump, what's the first thing they open up in the morning? The Wall Street Journal. First thing you look at. And quote unquote, I'm looking at the Wall Street Journal here, front page, the dumbest trade war in history. Now think about that. This is what the powerhouses in the United States read when they open up their newspaper in the morning and see that. Now, you're telling me that Mr. Trump didn't see this and go, oh boy, maybe a bit of more than I can chew. Maybe I'm playing the wrong game here. And then you look at the numbers on Monday and Tuesday in terms of the stock market dropping. I think you're absolutely right, Gary. I think some of his boys that have a lot of skin in the game here push some buttons, and you know what? Let's make it look like I'm still in charge here, and I'm going to give you an extra 30 days, Canada. Pat us on the head and move on to the next line of business. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional here. I think he crossed the line here. Absolutely. With our governments, with our federal government, our provincial governments, and more to the point, he really struck a nerve with Canadian citizens, and I'm sure it's the same thing for the Mexican citizens as well. I think he bit off more than he can chew too quickly to satisfy his ego, which is unfortunate for America,
Yeah, and of course he is claiming victory, or trying to claim victory, and his press secretary and a couple of other administration officials were out in the last day or two saying victory, and Canada came on bended knee, and we caved in, and Mexico caved in. Well, you know what? Really, all we did was just kind of repackage what was already in place,
Right.
put it in front of him again.
Yeah.
And there was nothing new. And, but
I'm
Trump
sure
was,
Prime Minister Trudeau and Mexican President are doing a video chat, or have done a video chat, and probably had a laugh over a tequila and some Canadian whiskey and said, "Did you get the same thing we did?" What the hell? What changed? I'm sure they're having a chuckle about this.
well, yeah, and there are some couple of good little cartoons on social media about that. But anyway, to say that we caved in, you know what? Go ahead. If you blow your horn for all you want. And look, Manel, buy Canadian, buy Mexican, buy USA.
Now that's a smart woman.
Yeah. And Bruce says his deck of cards consists of 2 cards and both are jokers. Truer words were never spoken.
Yeah.
So anyway, as we get into this now, the thing is, as I said on, I lost the day of the week now. On Monday, I said, don't break out the expensive champagne yet, because, he says, we'll see what comes out of the next 30 days. Well, the first thing is, you can't trust the guy. He lies, and he doesn't even live up to terms of an agreement, which is the free trade agreement with Canada and Mexico that he signed in his first term and called it a great deal, the best deal ever. And he broke it by imposing these tariffs.
That's
What
right.
kind of, he set a precedent. What other country's going to trust him? He can't be trusted. So, what else? And, now he's threatening the European Union with tariffs as well. They're next on his hit list. Well, speaking of that, we had a chance to speak with, or I had a chance to speak with our contributor over in Dusseldorf, Christian Falk, earlier this morning to see what's happening over there and what people are saying. Christian, what is the overall reaction to what happened to Canada and Mexico this past week?
Well, it certainly had an impact on Europe. As you might have heard, European leaders were supposed to meet today in Brussels to discuss defense and Greenland and other things, but the main topic very quickly changed into tariffs, looking at the actions which Trump took against Canada and Mexico. Still last week, the EU was praising what a great relationship they would have with the US, and that they never actually expected to be a target of Trump's tariffs. We still had a commission which was formed prior the election of Donald Trump, discussing what could happen, or getting strategic advantage of what could happen if Trump would come into the second term. And they did it, but all over the language was different. So the tone changed massively over the last days. So today's gathering in Brussels switched from, as I said, defense and Greenland discussions into tariffs. And looking at the statistics, looking into 2022, 2023, the trade deficit is quite significant. I mean, we're exporting to the US around $163 billion more than what we're receiving from the US. And looking at the export types, we're coming from a hefty industry here, automotive, cars, machinery, etc., etc. Whereas from the US, what are we getting? It's jeans, bourbon, Harley Davidson, and a lot of how do you say, like more like, yeah, there's more consultancy coming from the side. It's not non-physical goods. So this is what we think Trump is going to target here. And yeah, the tone changed. So basically, the leaders here in Europe were equal today, and they said all were on the same page, saying we will respond accordingly, and we will target also like more and more the imports from the U.S. And we should not forget Trump, or especially the German export industry.
Christian, what is the overall reaction to what happened to Canada and Mexico this past week?
Well, it certainly had an impact on Europe. As you might have heard, European leaders were supposed to meet today in Brussels to discuss defense and Greenland and other things, but the main topic very quickly changed into tariffs, looking at the actions which Trump took against Canada and Mexico. Still last week, the EU was praising what a great relationship they would have with the US, and that they never actually expected to be a target of Trump's tariffs. We still had like a commission which was formed prior the election of Donald Trump, discussing what could happen, or getting strategic advantage of what could happen if Trump would come into the second term. And they did it, but all over the language was different. So the tone changed massively over the last days. So today's gathering in Brussels switched from, as I said, defense and Greenland discussions into tariffs. And looking at the statistics, looking into 2022, 2023, the trade deficit is quite significant. I mean, we're exporting to the US around $163 billion more than what we're receiving from the US. And looking at the export types, we're coming from a hefty industry here, automotive, cars, machinery, etc. Whereas from the US, what are we getting? It's like jeans, bourbon, Harley Davidson, and a lot of there's more consultancy coming from the side. It's not non-physical goods. So this is what we think Trump is going to target here. And yeah, the tone changed. So basically, the leaders here in Europe were equal today, and they said all were on the same page, saying we will respond accordingly, and we will target also more and more the imports from the U.S. And we should not forget Trump, or especially the German export industry is heavily in the automotive industry, and we're taking almost 30% of all European exports going to the US. But what Trump should remember is that the German industry and car makers producing in the US almost yearly between 900,000 to 1 million cars in the US itself. So the US has, whereas 30% of those produced cars are re-exported from the US. So in some regards, Trump is also shooting in his own foot, let's put it like this. But we thought first it was only about tariff questions, but there's also political reasons obviously behind on imposing those tariffs here on Europe.
Now, what's the average person on the street saying? Are they becoming more alarmed about the possibility of these tariffs and what that might mean for prices on certain goods that they've become accustomed to purchasing that would be coming from the U.S.? Because here in Canada, it seemed to all of a sudden ramp up as the threat became imminent, and then during the period leading up to the day that the tariffs were supposed to start, all of a sudden the outpouring as to how the country came together. I mean, it was, if nothing else, it was a real unity boost for the country overall. Are you sensing that there's that kind of concern that's starting to build for the average person on the street, and will it lead to maybe a new shot of patriotism as well?
No, I think that's not what we're feeling. And basically, this is more industry driven, as I said, the automotive industry, which could get a hit, here specifically in Europe, Italy, France, and specifically Germany. But what are we importing from the US? It's actually not. We are the exporters here on that side. That shows the trade deficit. That's why we're a little bit more cautious now in the negotiations. But basically, the US is importing from Europe mainly. And that would mean, in the end, it's the end consumer who will have to pay for the imposed tariffs. It won't be the car industry here, but like people who are buying European products in the US, they will suffer from higher prices, higher inflation. And from our side, yeah, it's fine, but we're more or less independent from the imports, like from the US. So yeah, it's just like it hurts our industry. It could potentially hurt our industry. Like the IMF has warned today that if this tariff, like on how Trump imposed it, like in the first term, he was more like putting individual tariffs on different products like aluminum 5% or steel products like 10%. But now with the 25%, if that really comes into play, according to the IMF, that tariff or trade war could wipe out around 7% of the global GDP. So no one is really actually interested seeing Germany or Europe and the US as the biggest trade partners next to China in a trade war like that.
Do you feel that the level of trust as far as Trump is concerned has diminished because of how he's handled this? I mean, there's already a trade agreement in place here in North America, between Mexico, the U.S., and Canada, which was renegotiated and signed by Trump during his first term. And during that signing ceremony, he called it the best deal ever. And then all of a sudden, he turns his back on it and breaks the treaty by threatening to impose these tariffs. So the level of trust here has diminished significantly. Do you feel that it's diminishing on your side of the ocean?
No, what we feel is like we in the first term we were quite concerned, but now he is playing hardball. So we got prepared. We are prepared. But this guy is like, you don't know what his next moves are, but we will react accordingly. That's what the European Union says. So, and we're more united than ever since that. Like, this is not like a game just by France, Italy, or Germany on their own. We're all together, and we will go into this. But what we all know is he is a negotiator. He is a trader. He just wants to set the tone. He knows that he will never ever get through with the 25%, but he needs to start somewhere in order to set the tone on his side, and then he will negotiate. And we're here. We will also set the tone, and we will negotiate as well.
Now, do you see a positive coming out of this? Because here in Canada, we're all of a sudden realizing we put too many eggs in one basket as far as our trade with the U.S. is concerned, and we need to diversify. And one of the areas that ultimately we're going to be looking to is the European Union. Do you see that?
You're very welcome. You're really welcome. We discussed this as well. I mean, looking the relationship already Quebec specifically has with Bavaria here in Germany. They have a special trade treaty, or like a treaty, which is phenomenal. And like the European Union said already, Canada, you're welcome. I mean, it's just a little ocean in between, but the similarities between Canada and Europe, specifically Germany, are there, like we're very welcome in Canada.
Christian Falk, our contributor over in Dusseldorf, Germany. Interesting comments, especially singling out the deal that Quebec has with that German company as well, and the fact that, hey, we're ready, bring it on.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what I said earlier on, and Manel Karama mentioned, buy Canadian. I mean, these are just some of the small things that can have a dire impact on whatever Mr. Trump is trying to accomplish with these with these tariff threats. And it also speaks to what both of you pointed out, that, you know what, Europe prepared for a second term, and we kind of got caught with our pants down a little bit on this, where we've actually got all our eggs in one basket and completely dependent on trade with the United States. Based on what I've read so far, I think that Canada will be pursuing a plan B, if not a plan C, as well, to any sort of business we do with the United States. So, the more we can diversify our importing and exporting, as opposed to just the United States of America, it's going to be beneficial for us. It's going to be beneficial for our new partners, hopefully the European Union, Asia Pac, except for China. You're looking at Australia, New Zealand. There are a lot of marketplaces out there that Canada can do extremely well, and may eventually replace the United States of America, which is, I think, is a great loss for the U.S. As I said, this is something that we've been doing for 150, 175 years, and just like that, the entire thing is threatened, and it could become a moot point, which will hurt everybody at the end of the day. But I think, if we around the world band together, it'll be more painful for the United States in the long run. And we talked about it last week. Whatever Mr. Trump is doing now is going to go far beyond his 4 years. It'll extend into 8 to 10 to 12 years in terms of the damage being repaired. So, like I said, I do really feel for the other 50% of the American population here, where invariably they're going to be the ones that are going to struggle with this.
Well, Canadians are united amid an outpouring of support from other countries on social media, and we also rallied ourselves in a whole lot of ways, just in a very, very short span of time. It started building last Friday going into the weekend, and then with Trudeau's speech on Saturday night, and the clock ticking down to Tuesday. It was amazing to see what was taking place on social media. Let's have a look, Eddie, at a couple of the things that I picked up on over the last couple of days. First of all, we've got Trump's, ramblings, let's put it that way, on his Truth Social. The first one, where we pay hundreds of billions of dollars to subsidize Canada. Why? Well, there's no reason we don't need anything they have. We have unlimited energy, should make our own cars, and have more lumber than we can ever use. Without this massive subsidy, Canada ceases to exist as a viable country. Harsh but true. Therefore, Canada should become our cherished 51st state. Much lower taxes and far better military protection for the people of Canada, and no tariffs. And he also says that our healthcare would improve. Then, a little bit later on, he followed that up with the tariff lobby, headed by globalist and always wrong Wall Street Journal, is working hard to justify countries like Canada, Mexico, China, and too many others to name, continue the decades-long ripoff of America, all in caps, both with regard to trade, crime, and poisonous drugs that are allowed to so freely flow into America. Those days are over. The U.S. has major deficits with Canada, Mexico, and China. Almost all countries owes $36 trillion, and we're not going to be the stupid country any longer. Make your product in the USA and there are no tariffs. Why should the United States lose trillions of dollars in subsidizing other countries? And why should these other countries pay a small fraction of the cost of what USA citizens pay for drugs and pharmaceuticals, as an example? This will be the golden age of America. Will there be some pain? Yes, maybe, and maybe not. The first time he admitted that. But we will make America great again, and it will all be worth the price that must be paid. Oh, preparing them now for the price. We are a country that is now being run with common sense.
Yep.
That's a stretch, and the results will be spectacular. And then we go on to his another one that I picked up just after the second phone call on Monday. Canada has agreed to ensure we have a secure northern border and to finally end the deadly scourge of drugs like fentanyl that have been pouring into our country, killing hundreds of thousands of Americans while destroying their families and communities all across our country. Canada will implement their new $1.3 billion border plan, which was announced back in December. And as per Prime Minister Trudeau, we'll be reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology, and personnel, enhanced coordination with our American partners, and increased resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. In a lot of the choppers, they've already acquired 4, I think,
Yeah.
and spreading them out. Nearly 10,000 frontline personnel are and will be working on protecting the border. In addition, Canada is making new commitments to appoint a fentanyl czar. We will list cartels as terrorists, ensure 24/7 eyes on the border, launch a Canada-US joint strike force to combat organized crime, fentanyl, and money laundering. I've also signed a new intelligence directive on organized crime and fentanyl, and will be backing it with $200 million. That's all money that has been in the works. As president, it is my responsibility to ensure the safety of all Americans, and I am doing just that. I'm very pleased with this initial outcome, and the tariffs announced on Saturday will be paused for a 30-day period to see whether or not a final economic deal with Canada can be structured. Fairness for all. There's another door that he left open. Now it's a final economic deal. That means something else is coming. And then just looking at some of the social media posts. Hey, Canada, got your back. Love, Scotland. Dear Canada, due to the actions of the Mango Mussolini, you now hate America. We get it. We understand. We get to live with this dystopian hell every day. Please don't hate all of us. Half of us U.S. citizens currently hate America too. As a nation, we've lost our best friend. Our hope is that someday, hopefully sooner than later, we can end the game of tug and war and just chill together, making castles in the sandbox. Signed, feeling defeated but not dead yet, American.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those.
We have changed our holiday destination this summer. No more USA. We'll spend our holiday money in Canada instead. Love from Rome. I'm an American and a Marine Corps veteran. I stand with Canada and Mexico. Dear world, I'm Canadian, but I'm asking you, don't forget Mexico. We love all your support, but we're not his only target. Love, Canada. Yeah. And, it just went on. I'm an American who is all in for Canada. I put up a Canadian flag at my house in, is that Washington State? And we'll, Wyoming? No, Wisconsin.
No, that's next. I think they're next to Washington State.
Yeah, okay. And we'll be heading, I'm trying to think which one it is. Anyway, we'll be heading north for some shopping. Dear Canada, I'm so effing embarrassed on this side of the border. I really like having electricity and heating oil here in Maine. I cheer you when you all come down to help when we have major power outages. I'm sorry it's going down like this. All my love, a lifelong Mainer. Yes, most of that oil or energy comes from the refinery in St. John. Here's one that popped up. And this is, Quebec is so quickly becoming my second favorite province. And why? Because a Montreal newspaper yesterday, Le Journal de Montréal, and a picture of Trump and stupid in bold letters on the front page.
On the front page, yeah.
Yep. And then, dear America, you've pissed off Quebec. Do you know how badly you've got to F up to get the Quebecois to be proudly Canadian?
Yeah.
Another one of the unexpected tugging of the heartstrings over the past couple of days has been seeing Quebec's response to all of this. I'm from a very old French-Canadian family, but my grandmother moved to British Columbia, and I was born and raised without much connection to those roots. I think it's time to start dusting off my high school French because I think being a bilingual country is a beautiful thing. And then we had a few funnies along the way as well. I love this one. Hey, Canada, cut the power to the U.S. on Super Bowl Sunday. And then here's the one, cartoon picture of Trudeau on the phone smiling and the Mexican president on her phone smiling. And Trudeau saying, so I offered him what we've already been doing, and he dropped the tariffs. And she says, oh my God, same. So there you have it. Just a sampling of what's been popping up on social media over the last few days.
That on his social platform, I mean, he basically came out at one point and said that his citizens are paying way too much for pharmaceuticals and whatnot, and why shouldn't Canada pay more? Like, what are you talking about? It's like he's almost put his foot in his own mouth. And, then by the same token, I mean, you're looking at, he's always speaking about a deficit. There were some numbers I was looking at, and if you take out the oil and fuel, and I mentioned this briefly last week, take the fuel and oil that Canada exports to the United States out of the equation. Lo and behold, there's no more deficit. All of a sudden, there's a surplus going the other way if you take out the oil and gas. So that's the first thing that, obviously you're never going to see on his social platforms or mentioned by his posse. The second thing is, if you look at the border agency in the United States and some of the reports they actually put out, and the Canadian Border Control, yeah, you know what? Okay, fine. All this money is being spent in shoring up the border. I tell you how Canada is going to benefit from this more so than the United States. There are more drugs coming in from the United States into Canada than from Canada to the United States. There are more immigrants, illegal immigrants, coming into Canada from the United States than the other way. And we haven't even touched upon the illegal weapons that are coming into this country that shouldn't be here. So at the end of the day, where is the real problem? At the end of the day, what is it that Mr. Trump is really, really, really after? It's got to be more than that. And if you permit me, one of the final things I want to mention on my side is he did mention the Wall Street Journal. If I recall, the Wall Street Journal is a very conservative publication in the United States, and he sort of made fun of them, criticizing them. And what I'll do is I'd like to quote somebody in the United States that America is very proud of and continue to be proud of his accomplishments. Quote unquote, Republican president from 1981 to 1989. Ronald Reagan said, when protectionism rose in America, our peaceful trading partners are not our enemies. They are our allies. We should beware of the demagogues who are ready to declare a trade war against our friends, weakening our economy, our national security, and the entire free world, all while cynically waving the American flag. I mean, think about that. Those are extremely, extremely powerful words by one of the more successful presidents of the United States. He's basically made his mark in American history books. This is what he actually said. And and look at the demagogues today that are trying to ruin all the good work and great work that's happened between the leaders of Canada and the United States, all being thrown away for God knows what reason, ego plus. So I just wanted to close off my piece with those 2 points. The flow of illegals into Canada from the United States, and hopefully our deployment of our money is going to shore that problem up. And also I wanted to outline what Mr. Reagan said all those years ago, and it's coming to fruition today, things that he warned us about.
Yep. From Elizabeth, very noble of you to say, Mr. Trump. That was in response to one of the other Truth Social posts. But sorry, she's not buying it for sure.
Yeah, not at all. We're trying to be polite, Mr. Trump this and Mr. Trump that, but some of the horrible things like come across come across social media is just incredible. And
So-
yeah, and also we talked about Canadian patriotism and some of the critique we're getting from the United States the sports arenas down there. Yeah, Canadians are, embarrassingly to me, are actually booing the American national anthem up here. And I just wanted to say, I commented on a post on Facebook where I said, I'm embarrassed by the fact that Canadians are booing the American national anthem, and as a message to our friends in the United States, I very, very shortly said and politely said, I think you have to realize they're not actually booing the United States of America. Most of us know the lyrics to the Star Spangled Banner, and we sing them regularly at Canadian sporting events where American teams are present. We're not booing the United States of America. I think people have to realize that most Canadians are booing I won't use Mr. Donald Trump, Lisa. Elizabeth, I will say booing Trump, plain and simple. And Gary, I'll tell you the backlash I got on social media for actually feeling bad that it's being booed and saying that it was being booed, that it's not the Americans that are being booed, it's Trump that's being booed. I had to back out. It was just getting absolutely vicious. I just wanted to throw that in there.
So we have another comment coming up from Kevin. Are there any estimates on the dollar figure of services Canadians buy, including tourism, from snowbirds, Netflix, and so on? I'm trying to we do have a deficit. However, the biggest part of the deficit, Kevin, is the fluctuation in the price of oil and gas going south. If you take out, and I had the figures here a moment ago, but I don't have them at my fingertips right now. But if you take the oil and gas out, and Eddie, you made mention of this earlier too. If you take it out, it's not a major trade deficit like he's portraying it to be. And there's the price of oil and gas, the energy side of the equation, fluctuates all the time, as we all know, and there's no real control over that. So it is a smaller amount when you take that out and remove that fluctuating pricing level. I can't find it. I had it here a minute ago. And I know Kevin's going to give me the gears at some point over this for not having them in front of me. But if I can find them before the show's over, certainly I'll put that out there. Good point though, Kevin. Thanks for that. All right. So really now we want to know, has the Canada-US relationship been permanently tarnished? Can it go back to where it was 4 days ago, 5 days ago? Canadians feel insulted and hurt by the threats from Trump. Can Trump and future U.S. leaders, politicians, be trusted? These are all questions. And again, we'd like to hear from you as to how you feel about this. Can you ever even remotely feel like you can trust a U.S. president and or their politicians going forward? How do you feel about that? Can we repair the damage that's been done to our friendly relationship? Because we're especially along the border, there are communities where the border line basically goes down through streets of the communities, and the families are so intertwined. So I don't know. Can it? I know that I'm one that if I get really ticked about something, it takes me a long time. And there are some things that over the years that have pissed me off, to put it bluntly. And I'm still not over them, and I probably won't be, even right up until the day I close my eyes for good. I don't know. Eddie, what do you think?
Gary, it's very simple. You and I have both been in the business world. It's very simple. Gaining a customer is easy. Losing a customer, pissing him off, is going to take you 10 times the effort to get him back. This is not that different. I think that the United States of America are going to have not just a hard time reestablishing their credibility to the Canadian public, but I think this is more of a global thing that they're going to have to overcome. It's going to take years and years and years for it to happen. So, based on what I've seen in the newspapers, based on what I've seen on the various newscasts around the world, there is already a lot of questions coming up in terms of what is the United States doing. We don't understand what they're doing. It doesn't make any sense of what they're doing. And it's almost voicing the displeasure of what's going on. And typically displeasure invariably ends up to just having a mistrust in those entities. And I really think there's going to be challenges, especially during Mr. Trump's tenure, for as long as he's there. And I think whoever's going to be replacing Trump, whenever that's going to end up being, is going to have a big task in securing that America is now open for business and attracting the customers as it did before. I think we've lost Gary.
Sorry. Nope, I'm here. I was just trying to... Okay, just in response to Kevin's comment, in 2023, Canada's exports to the United States were valued at approximately $439.6 billion US. In 2024, the U.S. trade deficit with Canada was reported at $63.3 billion US. In December 2024, Canada posted its first trade surplus in 10 months, amounting to Canadian $708 million, driven by expanding exports, particularly in energy products and higher crude oil prices. The energy sector plays a significant role in this trade relationship, with two-way energy trade reaching Canadian $198.2 billion in 2023. And these figures highlight the substantial and evolving trade dynamics between Canada and the U.S. So that's a lot of figures to toss around and absorb. But there you have it. Yeah. I don't know, Eddie, a lot of people, Trump's approach to this, he really did it in such a demeaning way to Canada. And, it's a real tough one. It was bad enough his first term, but this almost threatening just to roll the tanks across the border and take us over as the 51st state.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's dangerous rhetoric.
Yeah. Kevin's asking me, are those figures just for goods or services as well? It's the economist definition of rolling it all in as goods and services. So, and I know I would presume that it would also include the various subscriptions to technology and such as Netflix and Discovery and Paramount Plus and DAZN and all of the rest of the U.S. Streaming services that are available. And I would presume it would also include the money paid for programming rights by CTV Global and CBC for various television programs that they buy from the U.S. So, it encompasses, there are more roots into what we do every day and how we spend money every day and what we purchase every day than what we realize.
True.
And the other thing of it is, the buying Canadian, there are certain regulations now that if it's like the Canadian content regulation in broadcasting, it can be massaged in such a way that some programming, for example, on television, can qualify as Canadian content if a certain percentage of actors are Canadian, or if a certain percentage of crew, the crew members, is Canadian or are Canadian. Different things like that. And I think Deborah pointed out to me the other day, shreddies, which, I love. They qualify as Canadian, but there's a certain component, I can't remember what she said it was, whether they were boxed in the U.S. and shipped up here, or processed in the U.S. and then boxed up here, or whatever. And it was enough anyway that it qualified as Canadian. So are we really buying Canadian at that stage? Not really.
I think they're made by Nabisco. Is Nabisco a U.S.-owned company or Canadian-owned company?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and the other thing is, a lot of people would say, okay, well, I'm going to buy all my coffee at Hortons. I'm giving up on Starbucks. But don't forget, no Canadians own, well, you might through your investments, but Hortons is not Canadian owned anymore. It's owned by a big venture capital company.
Right.
And I think it's U.S. and Brazilian.
Yeah, something like
two
that.
partners. Yeah.
The beans are actually processed in Canada, right? But at the end of the day, the money goes into this hedge fund pockets, in the United States or wherever they are, this consortium.
Right.
So even Tim Hortons.
Yeah. I mean, how much more Canadian can you get than Tim Hortons? But anyhow, Manel says, as a Canadian, I believe we should distance ourselves from the United States right now and maybe join the European Union. We need to do something. This is not going to go away. This will get worse. And yes, and I think there's a summit this Friday in Toronto, and the Prime Minister is calling in that council that he put together, and I think it was in December, and it has business representatives and others on it. Everybody now is talking about two things. The first thing is we have to break down the provincial trade barriers. True. And the other thing is we have to diversify our trading and look more offshore to, say more South Korea and Taiwan and Japan, and also the European Union. And you heard Christians say, we have so much in common with the European Union. We really do need to expand where we're going here. And the first thing is break down the provincial trade barriers. I listened to a story the other day about doctors and nurses, depending on what province they're going to, the number of different forms and certifications that they have to have in order to set up practice in a particular province, even though they've been trained in Canada. What's with that? Or a woman in Ontario can't buy order Okanagan wine online, but you can order, I forget where it was she was ordering it from, but it was there were those barriers. So we really do. Now, the last time I heard talk like this was during the pandemic, when all of a sudden the supply chain started to dry up, and even to the point where our access to masks and other personal protection equipment was drying up. because we'd put all of our eggs in the basket with China. And when they finally did ship some masks over to us, they had to send most of them back because they were defective. Like, you know, and there was a lot of talk about it back then, but then, you know, it faded. The 8-second attention span kicked in and it was gone.
Yeah.
And Deborah says we should have free trade between our provinces, no excuses, get it done. Totally agree with you on that one. But go ahead.
I got a question for you, Gary. I'm probably going to get shot for this comment, but you know what? Do you think that at some point Canada is going to thank the Donald? I'll tell you for what. Kicking us in the shin, kicking us in the groin, kicking us in the pants to make us realize that we need to do something differently in terms of supporting our economy and supporting Canadian products domestically and internationally. Do you think at some point we're going to reflect back on this, make a lot of wholehearted changes across how we do business in the country and elsewhere, that at some point we're not going to have that dependency on the United States? That's just a wish for myself, as a matter of fact. At some point, I want to thank Mr. Trump and say, hey, thanks for kicking us in the pants, and we don't need you anymore.
Yeah, have a nice day. I don't know if I'd go as far as thank him. I'd just go as perhaps and just say, you know, you pulled the plug and we had a come to Jesus moment.
Thanks for the wake-up call. Yeah.
No, I'm not thanking him. I'm not going to thank the guy.
Oh, sorry. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm not thanking him. I'm just saying, you know, Donald, you gave us a come to Jesus moment. And now we're moving on.
I'm just being facetious here. You know the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And Monel says, as long as he is in power, he is vile and untrustworthy. I know, and you know, Eddie, I remember about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, you said one day, you know, let's all take a bop across the border. And I said, no.
Yeah, I remember that clearly. No, you absolutely refused to do it. And I kind of scratched my head and said, but, you know, babe, you know, I think if we invite Gary and Deborah, it'd be a lot of fun going across the border for a jaunt. And you were so clear in that grim look. He said, no. And that was end of conversation. You know what? I'm agreeing with you right now.
Well, you know, at one time back in the 90s, you know, during the height of the cross-border shopping binge, I was back and forth all the time. And that started to pale as we started to finally get more variety here. And, you know, some of the things that you couldn't find originally, and the service in some stores really sucked. But then they started stepping up their game and started sourcing things. And after a while, and, you know, the dollar as well, yeah, not interested. And now, if you ask me today, do you want to go down across the border when we get back? No.
Yeah. I was wondering
and anyway,
a year and a half ago who peed in your cornflakes, but obviously nobody. Was a whole variety of things. But no, you know what? You know, being retired and traveling, you know, my wife and I are actually reflecting on where we're going to be spending our retirement money. And as conversations progress since Mr. Trump's selection, I really have less interest or lost complete interest in traveling across the United States unless where we're dealing with family issues and whatnot where we have to go. It's not appealing to me anymore because of what's been going on the last 2 or 3 weeks, you know. And I'm really sorry to say that, but that's the way I feel. And you know, a lot of the individuals that I'm communicating me with this week feel exactly the same way. Buy Canadian, check that you're buying Canadian. You're absolutely right. There are some areas where you just cannot get away from buying U.S. in terms of services and whatnot. But it's just a question of principle, right? At the end of the day, and being principled individuals here in Canada. At the end of the day, from the perspective of buyers here in Canada, and people buying clothing and whatnot, or technology, they're going to be a lot more prudent in terms of identifying where what they're buying came from. And we're seeing it all over the place in the newspapers. I've seen it all over the place on social media, pictures of Canadian grocery stores, our liquor commissions and whatnot, just putting Canadian flags all over the place, basically encouraging consumers like you and I, here's what you should buy that will support the Canadian economy, the Canadian farmer, the Canadian manufacturer, the Canadian businessman. So, like I said, I don't think there is my personal feeling is it's come to a point of no return where a lot more people are feeling like they did a year and a half ago, and more patriotic about it too.
And it's going to harm their tourism. It really is. I'm sure a lot of people, we did see one social media post where they said that they were going to come to Canada rather than, I forget where it was they were going to go. But anyway, I think you're going to see, like a lot of Europeans, probably give sober second thought to taking a trip to the U.S. and spending time in the U.S. now. I think probably you're going to see the same thing, with people in Asia having second thoughts about going to the U.S. and over the next 4 years. And the thing of it is, I think our relationship has changed. It has changed, and it's going to be generations, if it ever comes back, and I don't think it will ever return to the level it was up until last week. I think there will always be now, well, first of all, hopefully we'll be fully diversified and not relying on them that much. And I think, that generations going forward, the scars of this will be there at all times. They may not realize what took place or a full understanding of what took place, but I think the scars are going to be there for generations. And you know what? He brought it on himself. He really did. So now the other thing of it is, there are so many things too that we're dependent upon right now, and we have to start, in the form of communications. For example, we don't have a YouTube in Canada yet. And I was talking to you about my dilemma as to what about Microsoft? What about Apple? What about the iCloud? What about OneDrive? What do I do? So, but somebody like Apple, for example, could ship direct to Canada, to their Canadian subsidiary, and come in through that way and avoid, hopefully, the tariffs. Although they're watching it. Apple had its financial results call the other day, and one thing Tim Cook's watching very closely is tariffs and the impact that could have. So, and right now it's 10% on Chinese, all goods and services coming from China. And who knows? Apparently, Trump's supposed to talk to the Chinese president next week, and probably he'll come out of it. We had China on its knee, bending its knee and kissing the ring, sort of thing. I don't know. Anyway. I think we've had a solid discussion tonight, and I want to thank everyone for the comments coming in. Really appreciate it, because it really adds something to the show overall. And if you're watching this later on our YouTube channel, then leave a comment down below and let us know what you think. Night Talk returns in 7 days from Montreal. I'm Gary MacDonald. Good night.
Yeah. Good night.